La larga relación de colaboración que nuestra consejería mantiene con su institución hace especialmente significativa la presencia aquí de Nancy Luyckfassel, que está hoy con nosotros en representación de la ATA, que es la Asociación de Profesores de Alberta, de Canadá. Y para presentarla tenemos con nosotros a don Ángel Miguel Vega Santos, director general de Política Educativa Escolar. Ángel.
Buenas tardes. Ahora sí que comienza el Congreso bilingüe, porque yo sé un poco inglés y ella sabe un poco español. Entonces, vamos a ver cómo nos entendemos. Tengo el honor de presentar a Nancy Luyckfassel. Vamos a conocer una experiencia de Canadá, de la región de Alberta. Ella es responsable ejecutivo de desarrollo profesional en la Asociación de Profesores de Alberta, Canadá. Se define la asociación como una organización profesional de docentes que promueve el avance de la educación pública, salvaguarda de los estándares de la práctica docente y que defiende a sus asociados. Las autoridades educativas de la región de Alberta, con un gran grado de autonomía respecto al Gobierno de Canadá, delegan en ATA la gestión de dos programas educativos que tienen relación con Castilla y León. Me refiero a los intercambios de alumnos y a los intercambios de profesores. Los intercambios de alumnos con la región de Alberta, Canadá, vienen realizándose desde que Castilla y León tiene competencias en materia educativa. A lo largo de esta última legislatura, por ejemplo, en los intercambios con las regiones canadienses de Alberta y British Columbia, anglófonas y Quebec francófona, han participado un total de 260 alumnos de Castilla y León procedentes de 134 centros. Respecto a los intercambios de profesores, la asociación tiene una larga tradición en la organización de estancias de observación de buenas prácticas de sus profesores en el extranjero. Y al abrigo de los intercambios de alumnos en Castilla y León, se asumió su propuesta de que estas estancias se llevaran a cabo también con docentes de nuestra comunidad autónoma. En Castilla y León, este intercambio y otros programas europeos están en el origen de los proyectos de innovación educativa Observa-Acción para la mejora profesional docente a través de la observación de buenas prácticas y el intercambio de experiencias con otros docentes de otros entornos. Estos proyectos han evolucionado en nuestra comunidad autónoma y albergan una variedad de actuaciones que supera el esquema inicial 1 a 1 y 2 semanas. Pero siguen albergando estos encuentros que ahora no solo se dirigen a los docentes de lenguas extranjeras, sino que abarcan a profesionales de otros ámbitos de interés, como las tecnologías de la información y la comunicación o la gestión de los centros educativos. Centrándonos en Alberta, la diversidad cultural en las escuelas de esta región ha cambiado de forma dramática en las últimas décadas. Con esta realidad y la legislación de la Ley de Educación de Alberta, los profesores deben estar preparados para proveer a los alumnos con un entorno de aprendizaje acogedor, respetuoso y seguro, que respete la diversidad y alimente una sensación de pertenencia al grupo y un sentido positivo de la individualidad. Se espera que los profesores en las aulas de Alberta utilicen un amplio y comprensivo repertorio de prácticas de planificación, instrucción y evaluación para responder a las necesidades de aprendizaje de cada alumno. En su presentación hará una panorámica de las realidades actuales de las aulas de Alberta y del modo en que los docentes y los equipos directivos trabajan para apoyar el éxito educativo de todos y cada uno de los alumnos. Presentará buenas prácticas y métodos que utilizan las escuelas para diseñar docencia culturalmente inclusiva y sus entornos de aprendizaje. También mencionará los modelos de desarrollo profesional en Alberta. Una breve reseña biográfica de Nancy. Es la directora ejecutiva, como decía al comienzo, de Personal y Desarrollo Profesional de la Asociación de Profesores de Alberta. Tiene un máster en Educación por la Universidad de Alberta, con la especialidad en Enseñanza de Segundas Lenguas. Y también un máster en Orientación Escolar. Con más de 25 años de experiencia en la enseñanza, ha trabajado como profesora en diversos centros educativos, impartiendo desde niveles desde infantil hasta secundaria, y ha sido directora en 2 de ellos. Su labor ha sido reconocida en 2 ocasiones, obteniendo el galardón de la provincia de Alberta a la excelencia en la enseñanza. Representa la profesión docente en varios comités provinciales de la región de Alberta. Cuando quieras.
Now for the English part of the program. As he mentioned in my biography, my English is great, my German is really good, my French is quite good, and my Spanish is limited to those words Canadians want to learn first, how to say sorry, so esculpe y perdón. And mucho gusto and muy bien. I've learned a few, but so thank you for being willing to listen to me speak in English. I thought I spoke fast until I listened to Beatriz speak in Spanish, and then I thought you guys can handle anything I do in English, because I think Spanish people even speak faster than I do. So thank you, and thank you for giving up part of your Friday evening to be here. As teachers, you give a lot all the time, and the fact that there are 300 of you here on a Friday evening in a beautiful place like you live, I'm humbled and grateful, and I hope I will make it worth your while to stay. So, this is me. As many people have problems with my last name, it's when we talk about culture and heritage, my last name comes from Belgian. My husband is of Belgian ancestry, so you ignore the Y, you say Luyckfasselssel. My maiden name was Belg, a good German one. So, and I am a teacher. So although I work in another situation now, I am a teacher at heart. I teach teachers, but I also am blessed to be able to teach teachers in their schools, so I'm still connected to students all the time. And this is me in the last school I was at. So as my introduction said, I did start teaching 26 years ago. Some of you might not have been born then. And I started teaching high school German and English. And then I moved back to where I grew up, a town called Fort Saskatchewan outside of Edmonton, where I then taught German and English and phys ed and health and all kinds of other things depending on what was necessary. I moved on to be an assistant principal in a 7 to 9 school. So in Alberta we call those junior high schools, where I taught more things like computers and other stuff. And then I finished my career in schools as a French immersion principal. And I don't have the skill set to be an immersion teacher, but as shortages happen, they needed someone who had leadership skills and some French, so they put me there and they gave me someone who was bilingual in French to be my assistant principal. I joke that I started in secondary and worked my way to the top in elementary, because that's really where all the fun happens, and those people that are in elementary know that. This is how you can contact me. Please, my dad always said there's no questions that shouldn't go asked. You're never further behind by asking questions. We'll have some time later to ask some, but if you have other ones, please email me or follow me on Twitter. I promise my Twitter is not filled with pictures of cats or babies. It's all very professional. Yeah. So what I'm going to talk about is a variety of things, but first of all I have to set the context so you know what we are dealing with and what Alberta and Canada is. And when I say I had a warm welcome in Spain, I really do feel that way, because it's about 50 degrees warmer here today than it was at home. So this is Canada. It's a large country, and just to give you some perspective, Alberta, the red province, is the province I'm from. And Alberta's, I have to look at this to make sure I have the numbers right, Alberta's population, Spain's population is 10 times as great the population of Alberta, and Alberta is still larger than Spain. So as I took the train, I noticed some villages isolated amongst things. Take that isolation and multiply it. Okay? So what is Alberta? Well, if we have a population of about 4 million, and 50% of it is concentrated in 2 large cities. So the first city is Calgary. If you're Olympic fans like I am, I'm a huge fan of the Winter Olympics. Calgary hosted those in 1988. And the other city is the capital city of Alberta, which is in Edmonton, which is close to where I live. So if half the population's there, where's the rest of them? Well, they're in small towns, they're in farming communities, and some of them are isolated in very rural places where their nearest neighbor is 8 or 10 kilometers away or more. We are known for our wheat fields, and there's a reason. Farming is a huge part of the province of Alberta, but probably more known, we are for our oil. Alberta is a huge oil-producing province, and personally, I grew up on a farm where my dad grew wheat, and my husband now works in the oil industry, so I have both feet firmly planted in both economies. But we have a lot of nature, and we are known for our wide open spaces, our lakes, our wide open spaces down south where it is dry and warm. And we have warm summer days, very warm summer days. But this is what I left. So this is the famous Lake Louise. I was fortunate enough to be in a conference there last week. It was warm, but a lot of snow. And when I left, I came to Spain on Tuesday, and my husband phoned me and he said, a town near us, Vegreville, was the coldest place on the planet Tuesday. So everybody that knows I'm here is asking me to bring the warm weather home. And as my German friends used to say, the angels bring the good weather with them, so I will, of course, take it with me. With that diversity, we have a lot of diversity in the students that we have in our schools. And Canada is known for being a mosaic, we like to say. We take all the people and we don't, as our neighbors to the south, we like to say as a melting pot, we are a mosaic. And we respect and honor the other cultures. And this was an example of the school I was last in. We had cultural days at school. And the students, these are the little pictures they made of themselves where they demonstrated or recognized the countries they see themselves from. Now some, like myself, I see myself as Canadian. I am 4th generation or maybe more, 5th generation Canadian, so I see myself as Canadian, although I do have European roots. But some of the students in these schools recognized and recognize themselves as from other countries. So as was mentioned in the introduction, Canada is a bilingual country, officially. So officially we have 2 languages, English and French. But when students or people in Alberta homes were asked which language was most spoken, 76% said English. So although we are a bilingual country, our province in the east, Quebec, is where a lot of those French people are. We do have, though, 2% of French speakers in Alberta. Those of you that teach math know we're missing a lot, so the other languages constitute 22%. And where do those languages come from? Well, I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But along with languages, we have to recognize that there's also different religions practiced. So 67.3% of Albertans recognize themselves as Christians, 38.7% of that being Roman Catholic. 8.8% recognize as being Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, or other non-Christian religions, which means, of course, there's a large percentage, 23.9% at the bottom, who do not attest to any faith, particularly. And we have to speak about the Indigenous populations in Alberta. So long before our European forefathers settled in Canada, there was Indigenous people on the land. And they are recognized as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit at this point in time. So our Indigenous population still constitutes 6.5% of the population in Alberta. 28% of these are under 15 years old, so those are in our schools. And Edmonton has the largest population of Inuit living outside Inuit Nunavut, which is in the north. And something you need to know about our Indigenous populations, there's a few things. First of all, in 2015, there was a series of court cases that came forward about the impact of residential schools on Indigenous people dating hundreds of years back. And what this was when the colonial Europeans came to Canada, they decided that those people there were savages and that they needed to be assimilated into their ways. So the children were taken from their parents, put in schools taught by Catholics, Anglicans, etc. And the Indigenous people were no longer allowed to practice their traditional cultures, their songs, their music, their ceremony. And I can see by the look on some of your faces that yes, this is shocking. And what's more shocking is I grew up in Alberta and I didn't know this happened. Because what happened was they kept that piece of our history very quiet. But in 2015, it was quiet no more, and after several cases and information, something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was created. And with that, they had calls to action. And they have said, as part of the reconciliation process, those of us that are now here today, there's steps we have to take to recognize the Indigenous people and the damage that was done to them. We can't go back in time, but we have to go forward in a different way. And part of that is why I speak and will speak about the First Nations Indigenous populations throughout my time here today. One interesting fact is that although all the schools in Alberta are funded, we have two funding models. The private schools obviously are funded by private families, but the public schools in Alberta are funded by the Alberta government. However, on these reservation lands across our province where some of the Indigenous people live, they have their own schools and they're funded by the federal government. So there is a two-tiered system that starts right there. Some of these students live on the reservations but attend our provincially funded schools. So then there's another system that happens there. So I only have a short period of time for a very large amount of information, but this piece of history is important because when we talk about culturally diverse students in our schools, we have to recognize that for some students, the Indigenous students that we have, they are culturally diverse. And although theirs was the first culture there, it was not recognized as that. So we have that piece we're working on. 60% of Canada's population growth over the last 5 years was created by immigration. And as I said, we have a comparatively, once again, comparing to our neighbors to the south, we have a comparatively open immigration policy, and we allow people in on several reasons. If you have a family member who lives in Canada, if you have if you're an economic immigrant, so you have business people or skilled workers, as well as refugees and for humanitarian reasons. And in the last several years, this chart will show you where these immigrants are coming from. A large percentage from the Philippines, India, Syria, and China, followed by Pakistan, some from the US, because they know it's better up north. Sorry, I'm very proudly Canadian. From Iran, France, United Kingdom and the colonies, and Eritrea. If you don't know where that is, it's kind of by Ethiopia. Okay? So a large portion, this is from the 2017 report, and when you look at even just this, if you look at those are the top 10 places that the permanent residents were admitted from. There's two different types. Permanent residents are people that come and we give them a card that says you get to travel the world now as a permanent resident of Canada. You have certain rights. Okay, so these are where they're from. Sorry, you can see there the diversity of the languages and cultures right away, but it gets deeper because we also invite temporary foreign workers to Alberta. And way back in the 70s, they started this law about allowing temporary foreign workers to come, but it was for skilled workers. But in 2002, there was a shortage of unskilled workers. And part of this is an Alberta problem. Because in Alberta, if you work in those oil industries, you make very good money. And you make such good money that you don't want to work at the grocery store or being a janitor or doing any of those other kind of jobs. And Alberta has such a good economy that people from across Canada come there to work. So those jobs are sometimes left unfilled, and they're filled by the temporary foreign workers. And these workers often come with families and children, or they work hard to bring them here once they are here. Or here, there, well, Alberta, not here, Spain. Refugees are also something that we welcome in Alberta. So between 2015 and 2017, we welcomed 9,450 refugees. And the most common mother tongue of admitted refugees was Arabic. And around 4,100 of those were students. 18 years or less. So you can see right away the impact of what is happening in our Alberta schools. And it's one thing if these students come to those large city centers, like Calgary or Edmonton, where they have a greater population with more diversity. but when they land in a small urban, rural place, a farming community, that they may be the only non-Caucasian family in the community. And definitely their language will not be spoken or understood by anybody else in the community. And if we add to that, then the top 10 source countries for refugee claims are listed here: Nigeria, Hungary, People's Republic of China, Iraq, Pakistan, Syria, Turkey, Colombia, Democratic Republic of Somalia, and Afghanistan. Many of these people that come from these countries come with many burdens. So we welcome them to our country, but they have a hard time finding jobs, finding housing, settling in. Several of them are traumatized by the experiences that they lived when they were in their home country. And it's many burdens that they have, and then you add to that, you have a small child who's put in a school of strangers who don't speak their language, don't know their culture, don't know their religion, and sometimes don't look anything like them. So what do we do, though? And you know, I'm really proud of some of the work we've done in our province about this, because we recognize that it is important and that we have to teach. I was saying to one lady in the audience earlier this evening, when you're asked what you teach, how many of you say I teach math or science or something like that? How many of you say I teach kids? Because that's what we teach, right? Kids, children. Yes, and we have to realize that we have to teach the humans first. We have to reach their hearts before we can reach their minds. So what I'm going to talk about next is how we support the success of all students. And when I talk about diversity in our schools, I'm not just talking about cultural or linguistic or religious. I'm also talking about the fact that in our schools we have students with complex needs. Students who cannot walk, students who are blind, students who are hearing impaired, students who have Tourette's or Asperger's or autism. They are all in our schools. And we integrate them into our classrooms, and we work with them in a variety of ways. So the first thing that governs this is the School Act, and the government of Alberta made this. And I just picked 3 really key phrases in here that I think speak to what we believe in Alberta. And the first one is, whereas the best educational interests of the student are the paramount considerations in the exercise of any authority under this act. It's about putting kids first and their needs first. It's not about what's best for the school or the teacher or the principal. It's about what's best for the students. Second, we say that the parents have a right and a responsibility to make decisions respecting the education of their children. I truly believe in this. However, I'm sure like many of you, I have experienced a lot of change in this over the last 5 or 10 years. And speaking last night with Beatrice, we call them helicopter parents in Canada, and I understand you guys understand that term as well. We've actually moved on to Black Hawk Down parents, curling parents, lawnmower parents. There's about 50 types. But parents have a right and a responsibility, and we listen to our parents. We involve them actively in our schools and in the decisions related to their students. And it's sometimes hard. We don't want to say anyone can care too much, but we do have a responsibility to act in the best interest of the parents and the families. And finally, and most importantly, we say that students in our schools are entitled to welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe learning environments that respect diversity and nurture a sense of belonging and a positive sense of self. This has also evolved over the past several years to include, beyond the cultural and the physical and the emotional needs, gender identity and diversity as well. And then the second thing we have is something called the Teaching Quality Standard. And we've been operating under an old one since 1997, and this new one comes into play in September 2019. And what this is it's a document that outlines exactly what all teachers are expected to do to be considered competent. Okay, so teachers in our province are given their certification by the government, and it's the principal's responsibility to supervise and know how teachers are performing and what they're doing, to help them if they feel like they are not meeting some of these competencies. And I'll just highlight the titles in each competency and explain a little bit what they're about. So the first one is fostering effective relationships. And we say that for a teacher to be competent, they have to be good at relationships. We say that's number 1. It's the foundation. You have to have good relationships with students. You have to have good relationships with your colleagues. You have to have good relationships with the families that you work with. You have to have good relationships in the communities that you live. And listed here as well, you have to have good relationships with the First Nations and Métis and Inuit people in your area. So we say that's number one. Number two is we say that teachers have to engage in career-long learning. And if I was the supervisor of all of you here, you'd be getting a check mark tonight. Because yes, and under this career-long learning, it means many things. It means that just because you have your degree and you've graduated from university and someone says you are a teacher, you don't get to stop there. You have to continue growing. And how you grow may vary. That may be collaborating with other teachers. That may be attending conferences or congresses. That may be doing professional reading. That may be taking another university course or a master's degree program. But we say and we support that career-long learning is an important piece of being a teacher in Alberta. The next one is you do have to demonstrate a body of professional knowledge. This is where your curriculum comes in. You have to show that you are aware of the curriculum and how to teach it, that you can plan lessons well, that you can plan your weeks well, that you know how to assess students competently. Integrating technology is a piece of this area. We do in Alberta have a lot of technology in our schools and classrooms, and teachers are expected to include it in their coursework and to be competent in it as a teacher as well. And then we have this section, establishing inclusive learning environments. And in this section, we talk about how you do that. What do you do to make your classrooms and schools inviting and welcoming? And how do you make them caring? And it's through a variety of things. And it's not just, oh, we had cultural day and everybody got to wear the clothes of their land. Okay, that's what we call the cultural tip of the iceberg, right? We have to have a deeper understanding about how relationships work in that culture, belief systems, etc. But also, are we doing things in our classrooms that make everybody feel like they are represented? The next one, competency 5, is new. This did not exist in the 1997 teaching quality standard. In fact, these words did not exist anywhere in the document. Now they have entirely their own competency, and it is implying foundational knowledge about First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. This competency outlines that as a minimum, teachers in Alberta have to be aware of the history of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. They have to have an understanding of residential schools, of treaty agreements, of ways of knowing, of ways of doing, and some of the cultural pieces that make up the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. And the final one is adhering to legal frameworks and policies. That's 6. Those of you that want to take a picture, you can do it now. So the legal policies and frameworks are all those other pieces, right? So the School Act, the Teaching Quality Standard, but also in our school districts. We have 61 different school districts in the province, as well as private schools. Each one of those gets to make some of their own rules and procedures as well. I believe this presentation will be shared too, right, if they want. Okay, yeah, you can get it later too. But inclusive learning environments is defined in the Teaching Quality Standard. And I think this is a very important definition because it says inclusive learning environments means a classroom, school, or online learning environment or other educational setting structured to anticipate, value, and respond to the diverse strengths and needs of all students. This is truly what an inclusive learning environment is about. And I want to focus on a couple pieces here. The first one, classroom and school you understand, but online learning is a reality in Alberta. So students can do their coursework through computer methods. So they can do it online. The courses, they upload the course, they do some work, they send it back to the person to be evaluated, back and forth. And there's a variety of reasons students do online learning. Sometimes it is because they live in remote locations. Sometimes they might live in a small school that Physics 30 can't be offered because they're the only student in the school that wants to learn that, so they do it through an online method. My own daughter was a high elite level figure skater, so she trained all morning. She trained at school in the morning. No, she went to school in the morning, trained all afternoon. So she was only in school half time, so she did a lot of her courses through online learning. And if we look then next, this, anticipate, value, and respond. And I'm going to go into that in a little more detail. And finally, I want to look at the last sentence there, strengths and needs. Do you notice that strengths come first? That we want to look at students and look at what they're good at before we look at what they're not good at. We want to look at what they are good at so that we can celebrate them, focus on that, and use that to help them be better. So when we go through then these other pieces, anticipate. What do we mean by anticipate? Well, first thing is, like I talked about, we believe in teaching the whole child. And you can't teach someone if their basic needs aren't met. If they are hungry, if they are lonely, if they are tired, if they are afraid. And so we've done a lot of work in Alberta on making sure that students' basic needs are met so that they can come to school ready to learn. Many schools in our province have breakfast programs. They have toast and juices or whatever. As the kids enter the school, they can get a piece of toast and a juice on their way to class. It is not based on your economic status. We want everybody that's hungry to get something to eat. And sometimes you might live in a home where there was toast that morning, but you just didn't have time. And sometimes you live in a home that didn't have toast, and it sure is nice to be able to line up with the other people and just blend in. So we've had a lot of success, and our government has actually supported this financially, that they have helped support these programs so that kids, we know, and we know as adults, right? If anybody's hungry right now, they're having a hard time listening to me, right? So that's the first thing we look at making sure their basic needs are met. But also when we look at our buildings, our classrooms, our hallways, when we walk through them, there's little exercises that we do with our staffs, but we look at the hallways and we see, is everybody represented here? If I walked into this school, would I see myself? Would I feel welcome? Are we celebrating only certain types of religious holidays? Are only certain faces on the posters on the wall? Are there only certain things that are maybe sports are highlighted more than the arts, etc.? So how do we make the buildings, the spaces, the learning classrooms welcome and inclusive? Another thing that's happened a lot in Alberta lately is, although my first picture doesn't really demonstrate it, I tried to find another one I had, but I didn't have one, is we have actually started making learning spaces that are more adaptable. I don't know about some of you, but I'm guessing for some of you sitting in these chairs, although they're nice and comfy, has been hard, right? Some of you would rather stand to listen. Some of you would rather be able to move. So we've started creating learning spaces in our classrooms where we have wiggle stools, where we have rocking chairs, we have high-low tables, we have bar stools. Yes, we have bar stools in the classrooms. They're not for the bar, but they're just high chairs, right, that people can, we have stand-up desks. We have exercise balls. We have carpets. And we encourage students to learn at the right times, at the best way possible for them. Second, we talk about value. And this quote from Disney, not Walt, but Roy, it's not hard to make decisions once you know what your values are. Right? What are you putting first? And what are you saying is most important? And when we ask ourselves that as a staff, we might be surprised at what we find. There's a really great book that many of us refer to right now. It's written by a man called Ross Green. He's written several, but he writes about students who are harder, the ones that maybe have behavioral problems, the ones that act out in class. This one is called The Explosive Child, that this quote comes from. But he says, kids will do well if they can. No kid wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm going to go to school and cause problems for everybody I meet, because I don't want to be good, right? Pardon me? But it's just like adults. We will do well if we can, if we are given the right environments, if people respect us. And speaking of respect, and the word comes up in our teaching quality standard, I do have two children. I have a son and a daughter. My son coaches a hockey team, and he came back the other day, and he was having troubles with one of the parents, and he says, well, Mom, I have to earn her respect. And I said, no, you don't. So respect is lost. Respect should be given automatically. I respect the cashier at the grocery store. She doesn't earn it, right? I respect everybody first, and then they lose it. And that's what we talk about in teaching, too. You should teach your children like you would like to be taught. You should talk to them like you would like to be taught, the golden rule. When I look at this piece, I think of students that I've had in my life, and one of them was a boy named Nicholas. And I was fortunate to work with Nicholas over 5 years as his assistant principal, as his principal, and eventually even, when I was a principal, I still taught, because I believe that's important. I think this is my opinion, I think it's really, as a principal, I enjoyed still teaching in the classroom, because then I really truly understood what my teachers were dealing with. whether it was the students, whether it was the new assessment, whether it was the curriculum, etc. So Nicholas and I spent 5 years in different roles. And when I first met Nicholas, he was a very angry, hard to deal with child. And when I left, Nicholas and I had a great relationship, and Nicholas's family and I still keep in touch because I got to figure out what was the why behind Nicholas's behavior. And once Nicholas and I figured that out and we worked on some processes and ways to help him, Nicholas could succeed in his school and his relationships with his peers. The next one is respond. So we figure out all this stuff. We know what they need, we know what they're lacking, and then what do we do about it? And this section could be, you know, an entire course at university about what we do in Alberta, but I'll just give you a few ideas. First of all, we do use all kinds of technology, like I said. We use assistive technologies, but we don't limit them to students that need them. We think that if something works for one, it will work for all. We really believe in universal supports. So if there's a strategy or activity or a technology that works for that student that has exceptionalities, it's probably or possibly good for the student who's gifted as well. When we talk about gifted in Alberta, we mean the students that are high academic. Okay, they come with the stuff. And when we talk about technologies, it's a choice, right? If that's going to help the student learn better, then sometimes it's offered. We do also, though, do pull-out programs. So, for instance, when I was in my French immersion school, we had a process of being able to assess their fluency and accuracy and comprehension in French. And then when we saw students that weren't quite at the level that we thought they should be, then we could work together with them. And sometimes that meant I took a grade 5 student from this class, a grade 4 student from this class, and a grade 3 student from the other class, and put them together for that 20 minutes. And we all worked on something together because they were all at the same level at that time, and they all needed to move ahead. So sometimes those are 6-week programs that we would do. We would set small goals, how are we going to move them ahead, and that piece. Alternative groupings do happen. Sometimes we recognize that certain students need to be in certain groups together to work. Like I said, we do have a variety of students in our schools, and this is where my elementary peers, in the elementary schools, everybody is all together. The grade 1 class has everybody. By the time you get to grade 12, it has divided out a bit. So unlike some European systems, our students all go to school and through high school together, whether they're going to go to university or a vocational college, or they're going to enter the workforce. But that means in those grade 12, which grade 12 is the last grade, in those grade 12 years, we might have students who are more academic and they're together in this course, and we have the students in this other course that are taking the woodworking class. So there are some changes that way. We have educational assistants in our schools. So these are not teachers. These are other adults who have training working with students, and they assist us in our classrooms, which is a blessing, and there's never enough of them. But there's a help that can be given in the classrooms, and it does come with money, and I get a lot of these things too. But having educational assistants in our classrooms can help us support students who need extra help, who need extra support, or sometimes they just need to go off with another person so the rest of the students can learn for that moment in time. Another thing is, like I said, meaningful connections. We work a lot to get to know who the kids are as humans, so that once again we can teach them. A really great video, if you've never seen it, I recommend it on YouTube. It's called Every Student Needs a Champion. And it's written by, spoken by a lovely lady, Rita Pearson. She is now passed. It is some of the best 7 minutes you'll ever spend in your life. But one of the lines from that 7 minutes is, nobody can learn from someone they don't like. And I can think by the murmurings that you agree. But this is true, and we talk about this. And then building those skills and helping those students when they have lagging skills. So this is also a piece from Ross Green. When students present and they're not able to do things, instead of punishing them. So think of this. I can't juggle. Can someone in the room juggle? Anybody? Nobody? Hand up. Who's my juggler? Okay, you can juggle. Good. So you can juggle and I can't. And if you came up here and told me, okay, Nancy, it's this easy. Just do this. And I said, but I can't. And you said, Nancy, you have to do it or I'm going to kick you out of class. Okay, and I'll try again, but I still can't. You could say, okay, Nancy, if you do it, I'll give you a chocolate bar, because I will do anything for chocolate. And you'd say, I'll give you a chocolate bar. And I'd say, okay. and I try again, and I still can't do it. This is sometimes what we do to our students. We expect things of them that they can't do, and we threaten them with punishment. We try to, oh, sorry, I lost my word. What's that word where you bribe, thank you. Bribe them with rewards, and it doesn't matter, they're not going to be able to do it, right? So we have to recognize that, and we have to say, okay, that's a skill that's missing. Let's help them get that skill so that they can be successful. Now, I can be successful without knowing how to juggle, but I can't be successful without understanding social cues or understanding how to respond politely. So we have to help kids with those things. As well, we do a lot of brain-based research in Alberta, and we talk about how the brain works. We teach kids the hand model of the brain and how when that brain, the cortex flips, they can't learn when they're off kilter, right? So we have to help them get their brain back online. And we are also doing a lot of work about trauma-informed practice, because especially some of these students that we have, these students that have come from violent situations in their countries, and the students that have come from violent situations in their Canadian homes. Once again, if a student has had that kind of trauma, their brain has been affected in a way that learning is difficult. And if we as teachers don't take the time to learn about that and help students and know what to do for all students, then that's a detriment. This is one of my favorite pictures, and like I said, I have 2 kids of my own. I have thousands that I called my kids, but they weren't mine biologically. I just spent days with them. But I told my kids early on, fair isn't always equal. And this picture really shows it, right? If we teach like this, if we give everybody the 1-foot stool, is that going to be the same? I'm a taller woman, so if I'm on the stool, I get to see even more. My daughter is 5'1". She did not get my genes. Well, it's good for figure skating, but if I gave her that same box, she wouldn't be able to see over the fence, right? So when we think about this, what are we doing to ensure that everybody, you see at the end, they're all at the same view? At least start them there, right? Because we have to help them get to that place that they all at least can see the same goals, that they can see the same dreams in the field. I have a colleague that I recently joined us at the Alberta Teachers Association, and he's brilliant, and I'm so grateful to be working with him. And this came from his school, and I'm going to share it. He talks about the 100% rule in his school. And he says in his school, 100% of the adults are working for 100% of the students. There is not anyone saying, well, that's Beatrice's students, that's Javier's students. Those aren't my students. I don't have to worry about them, right? 100% for 100%. And what this means, in Alberta we have staff meetings once a month. Do you guys have staff meetings? No, some do. I can see some eyes rolling. I won't say where. Some eyes, 5. 5 a month? Woo, you guys win. But at our once a month, and that's minimum. Some have more, it depends. But at my colleague Chris's staff meetings, the first 15 minutes, all of the adults, 5 minutes left, but I started late. Oh boy, okay, I can pick it up. Okay? I thought you were just telling me you had 5 staff meetings. Gee whiz, okay. Okay, here we go, 100% for 100%, everybody comes, everybody takes care of the kids. Next thing that I want to talk about is a really important piece, looking at our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit culture. This comes from the work of Dr. Brokenleg, and he was from the Blackfoot Reservation down south in Alberta, and these are 4 key teachings that a lot of our schools have interpreted, and that I feel that if you go back Monday to your classroom and all you think about is these 4 things, and it will cost you no money, you can make the change with your students. The first one is belonging, and this is the idea of seeing yourself in the community and how you fit in. The second one is mastery, and it's not about being the best at something, but it's about feeling like you have, you're something you're good at, and it's something perhaps that's different than other people. You have that internal motivation, and you are rewarded with your curiosity. Independence is about giving kids age-appropriate activities to make good decisions. And generosity, although we might think it's about giving the best you. That to be generous to others, you have to first be giving the best you before you can do anything else. When we talk about professional development in Alberta, we have lots of great opportunities, and some of them are these. We have the workshop program. This is where we teach the teachers, and different than the training that you guys do, I think you have training centers, we go right to the schools. So we have 50 teachers that are trained. They're still active teachers in their schools, but we assign them to go visit another school and work with their teachers on a variety of workshops. As well, we have activities in the schools. We have PD days, and we have conferences and conventions and all kinds of other activities that people can participate in. I'm going to come back to this because when he gives me the 1-minute sign, then we'll do this. Okay, we also have a lot of publications in the province that we share that help the teachers. These are accessible on the ATA website and can be downloaded. But here comes everyone. We have these resources, teaching Pakistani immigrant students, and we have them of a variety of types. What's really exciting about these resources is it goes through what the culture is, what the language is. And my favorite part is there's pages where half the page is some key information they have to give the parents in English, and the other half it's in the language of the parents. So the teacher can just hold it out to them and point, and they can see what it says about the fact that phoning home from school is not a bad thing in our country all the time. We also have resources about Indigenous education and sexual and gender minorities. We have all kinds of websites that people can access to do further learning and that they can learn from and with their colleagues. These are great sites that those of you that teach English as a second language or English language learners, any of these resources are free and you can access them as well. Oh, no, wait a second, because some of you are taking the picture of that. And we have this other great resource, which is called a Respectful Toolkit Online. It outlines a variety of things for parents, communities, teachers, principals, and education leaders. These are not meant to be activities to use with students. But if you have people in your school who don't have cultural competency, who aren't open thinkers, who don't look at, who look too much and see the other in someone else instead of the human, then this website is very helpful. Okay, but because you have sat a lot today, I'm going to give you an example of what we might do if you were learning with me in a longer way. So you have to clear your laps, because you're going to do a little exercise. So you're going to, everybody clear your laps, put your phones away. So you're not going to know what time it is. You're not going to be able to tell me I'm down my time because you're going to put your phone away. And you're going to kind of make your seat so that you can stand up and sit down. Okay, it's a little bit trickier because these are theater seats. Ready? All right, everybody start seating. You start sitting. Okay, see? And I know, I'm going to finish in 1 minute, don't you worry. And if what I say applies to you, you're going to stand up and say, "That's so me." Ready? I am listening to Nancy right now. Woo! Some of you still don't get it. Okay, let's try that again. I am listening to Nancy right now. Okay, some of you are halfway up. I gave the look. I've got the teacher look. Okay, here we go. So everybody sit back down now. I'm going to ask you a few more things and we're going to see what applies to you. I was born outside of Spain. Ah! I have one or more parents who was born outside of Spain. I have a spouse who was born outside of Spain. I was waiting because I do. I have been to Canada. Woo! That's awesome! Woo! After listening to Nancy, I want to go to Canada. Yay! Okay. I'm finishing on that one because okay, I'll finish there. I'm sure someone has to do something. Okay. This is me. This is how you can reach me. Please contact me. Who else wraps this up now? I just leave? Oh, wait. No, I don't leave. I don't leave. I think they're going to try and ask me a skill testing question. No? Or time's up. I think time's up. No questions. Does anybody out there have questions? Because I'm sure they won't be as tricky. Pardon me, that's so me. You've got a question. Yay. I don't, it's like, okay, one of my favorite movies, right? Bueller. Oh, there's a question. Who's got the microphone? She does. Run. Run, Forrest, run. Lady in red. I'll start singing. Lady in red with the red microphone. Okay. There's no negative in my world, friend.
It's just a question.
Yes.
I would like to know if there is an official ratio of students versus teacher in the classroom, because you have that's a question for us. We also have a variety of students in some schools, and that's always an issue.
Those are two really big issues with Alberta teachers right now. We are about to elect a new government in the province of Alberta, and our advertising campaign shows a can of sardines, and when you pull the lid back, it's actually students inside. We have a real problem with large class sizes. So although many years ago they made a rule, it wasn't a law, so they don't follow it. We have classes with up to 45 kids in them. Yeah, you thought you had it bad. Yeah, the largest class I taught had 38 grade 11 students. So it was warm and smelly and full. But even the kindergarten classes, my daughter's grade 2 class had 32 kids. We have smaller, but we definitely have a problem with that. And the violence and aggression part is definitely also a problem. We're doing a study currently in Alberta about the violence against teachers because it happens. They are being hit, kicked, punched, spat on. Not everybody, not every day, but one is too many. So we're working on that. Yeah. Other questions? Oh, over here. Mikrofon, s'il vous plaît, monsieur. Oh, that's French. Kannst du das bitte schneller machen? That's German, and I've got video. Okay.
Hi. I was wondering if you have faced any opposition about all these measures to be more integrated and how you have dealt with them, because I can imagine that if this were Chile and you say, oh, we're going to respect everybody's festivities, you would get a lot of opposition.
There was definitely opposition at the beginning, and especially more in the secondary classrooms. Because in the secondary classrooms, they had been divided all the time. The elementary teachers had been inclusive the whole time. They just didn't call it that. They were just teaching kids. So there has been opposition, but how do you argue that everybody has a right to be treated respectfully and fairly? So we are moving teachers along, and we are moving parents along, because sometimes it's the parents that are actually more of the problem, because they argue that that kid shouldn't be in my student's classroom. And there's a really great, if you email me, I'll share this really great blog this lady wrote about that kid, and it helps parents understand that that kid can sometimes be your kid. So yes, we have opposition, but we are working as best we can to overcome it. And I think, once again, we're a human race, and you can't argue being human. Good?